Personally, I think you have to unlearn some things when reviewing older games. The reason for this is that it feels unfair to compare 13 to a modern shooter like Call of Duty, or even other stylistic shooters like Borderlands. That's not to say that every change made in the FPS genre has been for the better, but there are a lot of quality of life changes in modern shooters, especially in the look, feel and sound of the weapons that make comparing generations a mostly pointless exercise. This does mean that reviewing old games requires some leniency, but not so much that every flaw is written off as being a product of its time. It may be hard for youngsters to imagine, but there was a time when Ubisoft used to try unique things and also be good. The same year as 13, Ubisoft released Beyond Good and Evil. Then a year later came Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow. A spy game may not seem particularly innovative now, but at the time the Splinter Cell games were genuinely groundbreaking, especially when it came to their incredible lighting engine that meant different intensity of light and shadow would hide the player to varying degrees. Beyond Good and Evil, meanwhile, didn't sell well at the time, but has since been given the recognition it deserves by critics and fans alike. 13 may not have the technical innovations of Splinter Cell or the complex story of Beyond Good and Evil, but it's clear that the developers had a strong vision of how they wanted to adapt the Belgian comic into the video game format, while using its comic book roots as inspiration in the art design. 13 was by no means the first game to have cel-shaded graphics, with Jet Set Radio and Zelda Wind Waker being the two most notable games that were released earlier. Like those games, 13's cel-shaded graphics have allowed it to age better than some of its peers, despite the clunky animation and inconsistent voice acting. Characters in 13 have a lot of personality straight out of the gate thanks to their unique, colourful designs, with the exception being a few old military dudes that can be hard to tell apart. Alongside the cel shading, 13 also makes use of sequential art in its cutscenes and even in gameplay. In cutscenes, the sequential art is combined with animation to make vehicles or characters move from one panel to the next. These two effects combined allow them to keep cutscenes short and concise, and in combat, panels will appear on the screen when enemies are in hard to spot areas such as cliff tops or when you land a headshot. Furthermore, explosions will make the screen literally shake around like it's trying to escape your monitor, and guards can be detected by looking for diegetic text that indicates the tapping of their footsteps. I don't know how similar the story beats are between the comic and the game, but needless to say the game's missions and story feel like they've been cobbled together from the greatest hits of entertainment and real news stories from 1960s America. The game starts with the assassination of the president. For the first few missions you are told that your character, number 13, also called Steve Rowland, was the person responsible. In the first third of the story, as the player character grapples with flashbacks and intel from other NPCs, you find out that the real 13 was shot by members of his own conspiratorial organisation not long after he assassinated the president. And that you, real name Jason Fly, were given plastic surgery to look just like him in order to infiltrate the organisation known as the 20, and uncover the goal of their conspiracy in the name of their highest ranking member, number 1. The story isn't exactly Shakespeare, but early on I was reminded of Goldeneye and even some of the other Bond games like Nightfire and Everything or Nothing. With Goldeneye, I think Rare understood that their actual shooting mechanics weren't amazing, but throwing in memorable moments from the films, tons of weapons and gadgets, and even the tank sections gave the feeling of how a Bond game should play, at least one made within the limitations of the N64. Ubisoft have clearly gone for the same vibe. The shooting in 13 is certainly better than Goldeneye, but still feels reminiscent of the transitional period between arcade-like shooters and quote-unquote realistic shooters. Like Goldeneye, 13 focuses on keeping up the pace of a fun spy story where gameplay and locales change frequently enough to stay interesting throughout the 7 to 9 hour campaign. Although the first level of 13 is a little underwhelming, finishing in around 3 minutes, the second level is where 13 really gets going. The level is set at the Winslow Bank. When your character is found on the beach in the last mission, the only item in his possession was the key to a lockbox at this bank. After you're led to the vault and left alone to open your lockbox, you find a document and a comically old school bomb. Suddenly a flashback is triggered, the second of the game so far and just one of many more to come. After this, the player then has to make his way out of the bank in a non-lethal fashion. Mostly. This is quite a bold move so early on in the first-person shooter. Instead of carrying on the gunplay from the first mission, they instead show off the sneaking, the knocking people unconscious with chairs and bottles, and even the ability to take civilians hostage. All of these features add to the feeling of playing a desperate spy, using whatever he can to keep himself alive and uncover the truth. However, when you do go back to shooting in subsequent missions, there's a proverbial smorgasbord of weapons to choose from .44 revolvers that reward patience and accuracy to sturdy assault rifles and underbarrel grenade launchers. There are even weapons that, as best I can tell, are level specific, such as this hunting rifle or the harpoon gun. Almost every weapon in the game feels viable and switching between them is necessary. While there are stealth sections that require the use of particular weapons, and areas that have an abundance of ammo to deal with big fights, and even checking hidden rooms and side passages won't always reward you with ammo for your favourite weapon. In these sections it behooves the player to make use of as many weapons as possible, as well as thinking tactically about which weapon to utilise. The most obvious case of course being explosions for groups of enemies using cover, or close range weapons such as the shotgun or twin Uzis when going from room to room. Many weapons also have an alternate feature. For some it's simply the scope or the aforementioned underbarrel grenade launcher, But then there are features like the .44's Fan the Hammer, an incredibly useful feature if you've been dinking heads from middle distance only to turn a corner and come face to face with an enemy that needs to be dispatched of quickly before they have a chance to blast you with buck. And avoiding close range shots is essential even at the medium difficulty. You may have noticed at this point that there are often 3 symbols in the bottom left hand corner of the screen: health, armour and a helmet. While clearly influenced by the Wolfenstein games, 13 has an extra level to how these 3 layers of protection function. For both the player and enemy NPCs, armour will only protect what it covers. In other words, if you have armour but no helmet and take a headshot, then your armour will stay the same and your health will drop. In the same vein, if you have 100 health, armour and helmet but drop from a height, then armour and helmet will stay at 100 but health will drop. This does add an extra layer to combat, but is also something to watch out for because this game has a very strange idea of what constitutes height. Finally, there's the gadgets. You are only given 2, but they're incredibly useful. You get a grappling hook and a lockpick, both of which are used in the main story, but are also very useful for reaching hidden ammo caches or alternate paths. 13 may not have an abundance of originality in the story or world design. Just off the top of my head, 13 has taken inspiration from 60s James Bond films, the Mission Impossible TV show, Adam West's Batman, which is appropriate since he's actually in the game, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Day of the Jackal, and basically any number of other 60s and 70s paranoid spy thrillers, as well as the odd influence from real life too. All these pieces come together to create something that feels familiar, but that familiarity brings you into the world faster. This is a common storytelling trick in any medium and works a lot faster than having to explain an entirely new scenario in a new world with new concepts. Sadly though, another familiar aspect of 13 is the bad voice acting that was on par for the course in early 2000s games. It's not bad all round, just very inconsistent. The 3 big names in the voice cast are the late great Adam West, who gave a great performance as per usual, playing one of your allies, General Carrington.
I've got a Class A hero mission to offer you.
The neither late nor great David Duchovny doing the voice of the titular character, 13/Steve Rowland/Jason Fly. Duchovny's voice acting mostly ranges from average to terrible. I've seen quite a few other reviewers accuse him of phoning in his performance, but I watched 5 seasons of Californication. That's just how Dave Duchovny talks.
Well then, who am I?
Finally, your other main ally is Jones, played by the rapper Eve. Eve does a surprisingly good job, somewhere between Duchovny and West.
Listen, Mongoose has found you. Meet me on the roof, and don't go using G-Men for target practice, okay?
As for the rest of the NPCs, it's difficult to tell whether the director told them to play it straight or act like they're in a Saturday morning cartoon.
Well, number 13. The doctor will see you now.
This can be a little jarring, especially when it comes to the shriller voices. Luckily you get to shoot them in the face, which is of course the punishment for all bad voice acting. Speaking of atonality, which I was even if I didn't use the word, there is no moment in the game that quite compares to the prison scene. In the midpoint of the game, 13 has been captured and brought to a detention centre that seems to house people who have been experimented on psychologically. Early on in this section, you're marched to a shower room with the doors locked and the guards start acting like creeps and moving towards the player slowly, while a man lies either dead or unconscious on the floor with the back of his shirt slightly raised. It's genuinely quite unsettling. I don't think I need to say what this scene is implying. For me, it just felt out of place in a game that is mostly a camp romp set to jazz flute. Aside from the voice acting, there are only 2 other minor gripes that I have. First off, if you kill an enemy soon after they spot you, their pals seem to just walk off. This can be annoying because it makes it unclear to the player how long you have before an enemy sounds the alarm. Does it happen straight away or do you have a few seconds? Which is especially bad in the game's few mandatory stealth missions, where an alarm means resetting to the very unforgiving checkpoints. And that brings me to my second gripe. In the final mission, you're in a military base. The soldiers posted there don't know about the conspiracy, and they don't know they are about to be attacked by members of the conspiracy. Your only option then is to run around knocking them out without raising the alarm. Given that enemies have a tendency to turn around suddenly even when you're crouched behind them and moving slowly, you're left with no choice in some sections other than to charge at someone down a corridor, holding a chair and trying to dodge as many bullets as you can. All of this is made worse by the fact that there are some areas where you knock out a guard only to realise that there's a second guard at the other end of the hallway who is now too far away to stop from raising the alarm. The mission does open up after this, and the player is given plenty of weapons and armour to fight the conspirators. Also, you get to fight in this room that definitely didn't give me terrible flashbacks to that awful Natalia protection mission in Goldeneye. Naturally, it will remain to be seen how the HD remake of 13 turns out when it is released in November this year, but if you can't wait or simply don't want to pay £35 for a remake of a 17-year-old game, and the version of 13 available on GOG is one I would highly recommend. I've mentioned Goldeneye several times and I'm not exaggerating when I make the comparison. When it comes to gameplay, level design, weapon design, and everything else that is important, 13 is the true spiritual successor to the rare classic. Thanks for watching.
I've seen you within my dreams, seas fed by a million streams, tears were raining down from the clouds. Now we're just strangers in the crowd. You can fly, you can hide, you can close your mind, but I'm still on the run. You can fly, you can hide, you can close your mind, but I'll rise like the sun. Life has tricked us. Just forget me. Me. What is me anyway?
Can it, Doug?